Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Rama Rama. Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. 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 Hare Hare. Jai Lakshminath Prabhu. Welcome. There I was thinking, we've done such a good thing, but they won't accept things to do with the American elections. What to do? Oh boy. Okay. Hare Krishna. All right. So, there we are. Oops, okay. Oh, Krishna. Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our 8th evening program of, okay, just a sec, we'll do it again. Sorry, forgot about that. Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our 8th evening program of Sri Isopanisad for Bhakti Shastri. Thank you very much for attending. We really appreciate your association and your presence, and we hope you're finding it interesting. This evening, we're going to go on to mantra number 2. Yes, last night we completed mantra number 1, and we're exploring further the ideas of quotas, and even in terms of diet, how how we need to recognize the Lord as the proprietor. So these types of things we were discussing. So now we'll go on to mantra number 2. But first of all, let us offer our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchikalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yes, okay, so devotees, in we go into the second mantra, and it's a very interesting mantra. I'll read the mantra. Kurvan eveha karamani jijivashech chitam sama evam twayi nanyateto sti nakarma lipyate nare. Translation. One may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on working in that way. For that sort of work will not bind him to the law of karma. There is no alternative to this way for man. That's a very good message, isn't it? That's an interesting message. That if we live according to this, what Srila Prabhupada would call the Ishavasya system of recognizing the proprietorship of the Lord and recognizing quotas for ourselves and just in general for people, living entities, quotas, and recognizing that the Lord has made complete plans and a complete program for people to live in this world, in Krishna consciousness, and be very happy. So if we really come to understand these things and how to utilize these things, how to live according to those standards, then, well, as the Isopanisad says, you can aspire to live, means you'll be happy to live for hundreds of years. Just go on living. If you're working in that way, living in that way, because that sort of work will not bind you to the laws of karma. You'll be free, you'll be liberated, and you'll feel that. You'll feel that freedom, that happiness, the freedom from anxiety, and you'll feel how you're moving in very positive directions in life, in Krishna consciousness, if you live according to these principles. The principles of the Ishavasya system, everything is owned and controlled by the Lord and not by us. And everyone has their quota by his arrangement. So we stick within our quota and we don't encroach on others. And we have that faith particularly from the invocation also, we have that faith that these arrangements are coming from the Lord, they're perfect, they're complete, and we, ordinary living entities, ordinary conditioned souls, we do not need to somehow outdo the Lord, improve the plan of the Lord. We just have to follow the plan of the Lord. And then we'll be very happy to just carry on. So, okay, let's have a look at the purport. And, you know, we have tonight is Wednesday, then we have Thursday and Friday. So we got 3 evenings to go through this purport and the purport of Mantra 3. So we'll see how far we get. We'll just see how far we get. So yes, so Srila Prabhupada's purport here. Srila Prabhupada begins the purport by explaining, just pointing out the fact that everyone is aware of, that no one wants to die. Everyone wants to live forever. Of course they do. And Prabhupada goes on to explain, it's not just an individual thing, it's a collective thing also. And it's there in communities, societies, nations. It's there in species. No living entity wants to die. And yeah, it's visible in the animals. It's visible even in plants. Maybe you've seen sometimes where you may have like a driveway at someone's house made with bricks, and you see the grass grows up in between the bricks. And, you know, in some of these places that get abandoned by human beings, then nature takes over again. The plants grow over everything. So it's there even in the plants, even in difficult circumstances where there's a road, the grass grows through the road. Oh gosh. Trees growing on roofs of houses. I remember when we used to go to Bloemfontein from Durban in the 80s to raise funds. Well, not just Bloemfontein, but the Free State. And we'd go from Durban, we'd go up and around past Harry Smith, Bethlehem, and Senekal, and then go down to Bloemfontein. And there was one little rock hill, small. It was not big at all. It was maybe across maybe 20 meters. And it was maybe 15 meters high or whatever, 20 at the most. And we would drive past it every time it was near the road. And there was very little growing on it, a bit of grass. But there was one tree on the top. And the tree was growing on its own. And whenever we would drive past, we would note, there's that tree. It's still there in, such an unpleasant situation. Yeah. So the desire to just carry on living and not to die It's there in all species. And as Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, that it's only natural because we are eternal by nature. We're eternal spirit souls, and therefore death for us is completely unnatural. And there's just a natural tendency when there's some like mortal danger, serious danger, then there's this natural tendency. We don't want to die. Find a solution. Find some way to deal with the situation. Yes. But of course, it's all perverted in material life, because in material life, it's all to do with the body. We must keep the body alive at all costs, for as long as possible, forever if possible. Yes. So the point, a point which is made here is that we have to work. That's there by the laws of nature. No one can live without working. But we have to ideally, and this is one point that is made in Bhagavad Gita, of course, we have to perform our prescribed duties according to Bhagavad Gita, according to the Vedic scriptures, according to Krishna consciousness. We have to perform our prescribed duties. Arjuna was a warrior. And of course, as you know, Arjuna did not want to perform his prescribed duty of fighting because he was afraid he would incur sin. I mean, he had a few fears, but one of them was that he would incur sin. But then Lord Krishna preached to him more and more as time went on, and eventually told him, it's not that if you fight and kill, you will incur sin. No. The thing is, if you do not fight, if you neglect your duty and you do not fight, then you will incur sin. Then you'll incur sin. So you must fight. So this point is there, that everyone has to perform their prescribed duty. And if they do that, or if they do not do that, as Prabhupada says in the purport, that the living entity has to work for his livelihood, because that is the law of material nature. And if he does not act according to his prescribed duties, he transgresses the laws of nature and binds himself more and more to the cycle of birth and death. Whereas if the person performs their prescribed duties according to the Vedas, then they will not incur karma. They'll be freed from karma, particularly if that's done in Krishna consciousness. Even if it is not done in Krishna consciousness, but just on the basis of varnashram, duty, like that, even without Krishna consciousness, still purification will occur. Just because you do your duty according to the Vedic scriptures. Yes, and this is what Lord Krishna is saying, that if you continue to work in this way, particularly in Krishna consciousness, recognizing the position of the Lord, respecting that, and serving the Lord by performing your prescribed duties and not taking more than your quota, these things, then this is what what the personified Vedas are saying here in Sri Isopanisad. You will be so happy and you'll be free, you'll be carefree, free from anxiety, and you'll be so satisfied that you will be happy to just go on like that. You will not have to stop. You'll not feel like you want to stop. Because, as the verse says, that work will not bind you to the laws of karma. You will be karma free, in a position of liberation, actually. And as the verse says, there is no alternative. There's not another approach somehow or other to get free from karma and be liberated and carefree. There's not really another way. Certainly not a real way. Maybe some sort of hallucination for a while. So if a person does not do their duty according to the Vedas, then ultimately, of course, they'll be bound up by their karma, they'll incur reactions, ultimately they'll take rebirth. Yes. Okay. So let's go on to the second paragraph. So here, this is an interesting discussion, which is in keeping very much with also a discussion in Bhagavad Gita about different types of activity. Yeah. So, Prabhupada begins the second paragraph that all forms of life, all species, are subject to birth and death, and just ongoing, repeated births and deaths. But when a living entity comes to the human form of life, they have a chance to get free from karma. So then Srila Prabhupada goes into a discussion about karma, akarma, and vikarma. And as Prabhupada says in the purport, these things are very clearly described in the Bhagavad Gita. Yes. So Prabhupada elaborates that actions performed in terms of your prescribed duties, as described in revealed scriptures, this is called karma. Then, next, actions that free you from the cycle of birth and death, they are called akarma. Akarma, the in front, generally means without. Yes. Without karma. And activities which are performed through the misuse of our freedom and that lead one, direct one to the lower life forms. Oh, Krishna. They're called vikarma. And generally V basically means very. And the idea is you'll get a very, very great amount of karma. You will incur many reactions, sinful reactions, and you'll therefore fall down to lower species. Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada goes on to say that if people are intelligent, and if you remember last night, Srila Prabhupada also talked about people being sufficiently intelligent to understand that, let's just see what Prabhupada says here, if I can find it. One should therefore be intelligent enough to know that except for the Lord, no one is the proprietor of anything, even your body. What to speak of your money or your house or your family, all these things. So it's this type of intelligence which Srila Prabhupada is talking about here in the second paragraph of this purport of Mantra 2, that intelligent people prefer of these three types of action: karma, regular material prescribed duties; akarma, activities which free you from reaction and free you from material life, free you from birth and death; and vikarma basically means sinful activity, which will just force that you just get thrown down into lower types of material existence. So intelligent people with that sort of intelligence, as we just read from the previous purport, intelligent enough to recognize the position of the Lord. So people who are intelligent enough like that, they prefer to perform akarma, which means akarma meaning free from karma, which frees you from the bondage to your material reactions, frees you from your entanglement in this world, and through this you go back to Godhead. This means devotional service in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada then goes on to say that ordinary people means ordinary people who are aware of the Vedic tradition, the laws of karma, action and reaction. They have some knowledge of these things, but not as deeply as these other, the type we just talked about, who know the position of the Lord. So these people, ordinary people, they prefer to perform just regular material prescribed duties to get better material situations. This is what they prefer. And but the intelligent people we talked about, they understand the danger of any material situation, any material position. It may be a higher material position, even in the heavenly planets, but there's great danger involved. So therefore the intelligent people prefer akarma. And Srila Prabhupada concludes the paragraph: consequently, the intelligent people, consequently, they seek that work which will free them from the reactions of both good and bad work. Such liberating work is described here in the pages of Sri Isopanisad. Yes. So that's how what the personified Vedas, that's how a person can achieve what the personified Vedas are talking about, that coming to a level where you'll be able to aspire to live for hundreds of years, because you're not bound at all to karma, and there's no alternative to get out of this mess than to live like this in akarma. We have a question here based on this text too. We just paraphrased text 2 itself, the verse. But here we are going to refer you to a purport from Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 4:21-48. Fourth canto, chapter 21, verse 48. And which says, in the purport, at least one thing which is said is that another feature of a devotee is that he lives forever because of his infallible devotion to the Lord. The devotee lives forever. All right, so the question is that, we mentioned this purport which talks about living forever. The question is, how is it that the devotee of the Lord lives forever? And there are it's multiple choice. There are 4 choices. How about this? I'll ask you, or I'll tell you all 4. You can see which one you think is right. So, number 1, because the devotee is a spirit soul which exists eternally, is that how a devotee lives forever? Or because of the devotee's infallible devotion to the Lord? Or because of the devotee's control of his senses? Or because the Lord of Death is afraid of a devotee of the Lord? Haribol. What do you think is the correct answer? Interesting, right? Because I just read it no more than 2 minutes ago. So the answer is, it's number 2, B. Because of the devotee's infallible devotion to the Lord, the devotee lives forever. All right, so we go on to the 3rd paragraph. 3rd paragraph, it's a little shorter paragraph. Okay, anyway. So Prabhupada explains that what we've just been talking about for the last half hour or whatever, these things are more elaborately explained in Bhagavad Gita, which is sometimes called Gita-Upanishad, the cream of all the Upanishads. We could mention that it's a fact, even Srila Prabhupada in our BBT Bhagavad Gita and Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada at the beginning refers to it as Gita-Upanishad. Not exactly that it's one of the Upanishads, because it's not. It's part of Mahabharata, actually. But the thing is that in nature, it has the nature of an Upanishad, meaning basically connecting everything up with the eternal spiritual reality. In this case, with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other Upanishads, like, as we mentioned, connected with the Samhitas of the four Vedas. In many cases, they will just show how whatever was in the Samhita and the Brahmana and Aranyaka, how that was connected with Brahman, not necessarily the Supreme Lord. This is the thing about the Isopanisad. I mean, there are others also which are, very clearly Krishna conscious. Not so many, but there's a few. But this Isopanisad is just so Krishna conscious. It's from the Upanishads, but it's so Krishna conscious. So Bhagavad Gita then, Prabhupada makes a note there in the beginning pages of Bhagavad Gita that it's called Gitopanishad. So what does it mean? What it means is that it is of the nature of an Upanishad, meaning the way things are presented, the way the spiritual philosophy is presented in Bhagavad Gita, it's basically the same or very, very similar to how philosophy is presented in Upanishads. Yeah, so Prabhupada refers to a number of verses, their whole sequence, third chapter, from verse 9 to 16, in which Krishna says that you cannot attain the state of akarma, freedom from reactions, without executing the prescribed duties mentioned in the Vedic literature. And in this way, if we follow this, if we do like this, then it will regulate us in such ways that it will help us to realize the Lord. Yeah, that's a fact. Prescribed duties for the Supreme Lord. It'll help us come closer to the Lord and become Krishna conscious. So, because the Lord will be the recipient of all of your activities. Yes, so I thought what I would do, let me just read these verses from the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse 9 to verse 16, and you'll see how Lord Krishna there is talking about performing your prescribed duties as sacrifices for the Supreme Lord, and in that way becoming liberated, basically becoming liberated. Whereas if you don't do that, then you get entangled and your situation becomes hopeless. So let me just read these, looks like 7 or 8 verses. Bhagavad Gita chapter 3, verse 9 to 16. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you'll always remain free from bondage. 10. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this yajna, sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. 11. The demigods, being pleased by sacrifice, will also please you, and thus by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. 12. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yajna, sacrifice, will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. 13. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. We read that verse also last night. That's pretty heavy. Eating only sin. Oh, what a terrible situation. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, sacrifice, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. If one performs one's Vedic prescribed duties, one naturally develops a propensity towards yajna, and the mood of sacrificing to the Lord naturally develops. 15. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. And 16, the last one. My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice thus established by the Vedas certainly leads a life full of sin, living only for the satisfaction of the senses. Such a person lives in vain. Hare Krishna. So we're in paragraph 3. And Prabhupada continues that if people perform their prescribed duties according to the Vedic literatures, Prabhupada says, this literature can regulate the working energy of a human being in such a way that he can gradually realize the authority of the Supreme Being. You know, the Vedic literatures, wherever you look, you find Krishna directly or indirectly. So if people perform their prescribed duties, then sooner or later it'll become apparent that this is all connected with Krishna. I'm not just doing my duties just for the sake of doing duties. This is all for Krishna. And so Prabhupada makes the point that in this way, gradually the person comes to realize the Lord. And then when he starts to actually realize the Lord, then the person has come to the stage of positive knowledge, being very nicely situated. And Prabhupada concludes the paragraph, in this purified stage, the modes of nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, cannot act. And he's able to work on the basis of naishkarmya or akarma. It's just a sort of an alternative word for akarma. Naishkarmya, no karma. Akarma, without karma. Such work does not bind one to the cycle of birth and death. So we go on to paragraph 14. And Prabhupada makes, as Prabhupada does inevitably from time to time, he emphasizes devotional service. So no one has to do anything more, anything other than render devotional service to the Lord. Yeah. But, as Prabhupada goes on to say, many people are so entangled and just so habituated to material existence that they cannot immediately take up devotional service. So what should they do? Prabhupada explains that a conditioned soul, an ordinary man, let's hang on a sec. So conditioned soul is used to working for his own sense gratification, either for himself or as extended sense gratification, like the enjoyment of his family, or even the enjoyment of his nation, or like that. But so when that's, Prabhupada says, when this principle of sense enjoyment is extended to include society, nation, or humanity in general, it assumes various attractive names like altruism, socialism, communism, nationalism, and humanitarianism. So these, Prabhupada goes on to say, these isms are just nice forms of karma bandhana, nice ways of getting entangled on the material platform. Nice ways, attractive ways. But so what should you do? What should a person do if they're attached like that? They can do the same things, but put Krishna in the center. Yeah. And so Prabhupada says, there's no harm then being a family man, an altruist, socialist, communist, whatever, provided that one carries out those activities in relation with Ishavasya, the God-centered conception. And yeah, I want to give an example. Well, I want to give a couple of examples. Let me give a couple of examples. I'm starting to melt here. Because of some medication which I was taking for about 6 months, I'm prone to get changes of body temperature. So my body has just become hot. Anyway, so I want to give a couple of examples of what a person can do by putting Krishna in the center of their altruistic humanitarian activity, you could say, or family activity also. I want to give a couple of examples. Many nice people, soft-hearted people, when they see starving people who are very hungry, living in poverty, and they just can't manage to eat properly, etc. So many nice people, they like to try to provide some food for those people. And therefore you get these feeding programs of different types. But they're not Krishna conscious. You're just feeding the starving, hungry people. It's just an altruistic, materialistic activity. But in Krishna consciousness, of course, we have food for life. And in food for life, food is prepared, nice food is prepared and offered to the Lord so it is prasadam. And it's spiritually very beneficial for the people to eat it. And then the devotees go, and at least as much as possible, we like to have kirtan before the prasadam's distributed, maybe while it's distributed also, if there's enough devotees. So it's a real Krishna conscious experience, but the hungry people are getting fed. So the people who want to help those unfortunate people who cannot get enough food to eat, they can do it in Krishna consciousness, with Krishna in the center and in the company of other devotees. This is nice. This is what Prabhupada's talking about here. And I want to give a second example. It's also a very nice example. In Mumbai, there's a group, quite a group, of devotee doctors. They're all qualified people. They're very qualified doctors. And there are some nurses, who are devotees. So what did they do? They started a hospital. And it's the Bhaktivedanta Hospital. I was there for 3 weeks once. And so they're doing their natural duty because they're doctors. That's their natures. That's what they are. They're doctors. But now they're doing it with Krishna in the center. So it's good for them, but it's also good for the people, the sick people who come to be cured by them. So like this, in different ways, people who have understood, that people who are intelligent enough to understand this point about the Lord having to be in the center, and it's necessary to connect our activities and other people up with the Lord. So there are a number of ways like this that they can do it. And in this way, fulfill what this verse of Isopanisad is saying. All right. Let's carry on to paragraph 5. We won't finish the whole purport, but that's okay. Let's see. All right, so Prabhupada refers to, doesn't exactly quote completely, but he does refer to another Bhagavad Gita verse. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 40, which explains that God-centered activities are so valuable that just a few of them can save a person from the most terrible danger practically of all. Just give me a second. So what is that verse, devotees? Devotees who are doing Bhakti Shastri. Chapter 2, verse 40. Is this one of the verses you learn? Anyway, I'll tell you what it is. Neha Bikrama Nashosti Pratyavayo Navijate Swalpamapyasya Dharmasya Trayate Mahato Bayat. Oh, this is an important verse. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. And Prabhupada goes on in the purport here in Isopanisad to explain what is this greatest danger. The greatest danger is to glide down again into the evolutionary cycle of birth and death, down among the 8,400,000 species. Prabhupada there is being very, what would you say, sort of, you might say, very genteel about it, gliding down. It almost sounds nice. Glide down into the lower species. Generally, we call it falling down. Yeah. And that falling down, generally any falling down of any type is not nice. If you trip and fall down on the ground, it's happened to all of us. If you fall down some stairs, falling is not nice. It's usually painful, and it's just extremely not nice. So falling down into the lower species is like that. Oh, it's horrible. It's very horrible, actually. So the problem is that now we've all got the human form of life. If we're not careful, we have to be careful and apply ourselves in Krishna consciousness, because if we're not careful, then that may happen. There are examples of devotees who fell down from being devotees in obviously human bodies. They fell down into lower species. Who's the classic example? Can you think? The classic example is Bharat Maharaj. Classic example. Fell down to become a deer. Eventually he was saved, but in the meantime, before he was saved, he had to go through a whole lifetime as a deer. Oh, Krishna, that is not nice. Yeah, so that's when Lord Krishna in this chapter 2, verse 40 of Bhagavad Gita, when Lord Krishna talks about Mahato Bhayat, the greatest type of fear, then that's what he's talking about. Somehow falling down into lower species. Yeah, so, and Prabhupada, he makes, as always, some very interesting points. That, of course, that's terribly unfortunate if that happens, falling down. Prabhupada makes the point that due to our defective senses, and actually you could say due ultimately to all our four defects, Prabhupada particularly points out defective senses. Prabhupada says, a foolish man cannot see that this is happening, that I am falling down. Cannot really see. He thinks that everything's okay. And therefore, as Prabhupada says, therefore, we should work in the spirit of Ishavasya, recognizing the proprietorship of the Lord, therefore using whatever is at our disposal in his service, but particularly for ourselves, just sticking to our quota and not encroaching on other people's quotas. Live according to the Ishavasya system. Otherwise, Prabhupada says, then Prabhupada says, if we live according to Ishavasya, then we can be happy living for many years. But otherwise, if we don't live like that, what's the point of living for a long time? Prabhupada explains, a tree lives for hundreds and hundreds of years. But there's no point. What's the point of that life? Prabhupada says, there's no point in living a long time like trees, or breathing like bellows, or begetting children like hogs and dogs, or eating like camels. So like that. There's no point. But if you act in Krishna consciousness, then of course chapter 2 verse 40 applies. You'll be saved from that danger. But then also Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 30, it's not mentioned in the purport, I'm just mentioning it myself, that in chapter 9 verse 30, if someone is trying to serve Krishna, but somehow they have some major difficulty, then all they need to do is try to carry on in their devotional service. And then they become quickly reinstated by the mercy of the Lord. But so Prabhupada concludes this fifth paragraph: a humble, God-centered life is more valuable than a colossal hoax of a life dedicated to godless altruism or socialism. A colossal hoax of a life. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yes.